Well, Chandler, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. I had a such a lovely conversation with your partner there at Relay Health app, and he had reached out to me a few times. God bless him; he's a good sales guy. Great follow up. Really
Oh, yes.
appreciate it.
Yep.
But after spending some time with him, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to partner with these guys because I instantly saw the value of the way you specifically go about helping people connect with others that are having the same kinds of struggles because we all, it's like addiction is a disease of isolation, connection is a cure. And you guys like nailed that message right from the very beginning. So I just want to congratulate you on such a
Oh,
great
thank you.
app.
Oh, that's too kind of you. I mean, yeah, we love what we do because we realize that this isn't a problem that just one or two people have, but it really is this isolation theme that spans even beyond the topic of addiction, that we need more tools trying to help make it easier for those of us that are trying to work on ourselves and to do it in a way that isn't so depressing and isolating. And there are other people, and that's the whole point of, working together, and that's why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I love the mission and I'm all about tools and actions, like actual practices, right? And I immediately, when he was telling me, but we'll go over all the features and stuff of the app, but when he was specifically talking about how you can like raise a red flag and be like, hey, I'm really struggling today, and people in your small group can reach out, they'll get notified and they'll reach out to offer support. I just want to tell you a little story. I was in this on TikTok, as I don't know why that's embarrassing to admit, but I was on TikTok and this gal I had connected with was talking about in her 12-step community, they were offering, she's like, you know what, these people, they say you can call them at any time. And then I reached out and tried to call these people and nobody returned my call. And she was so like dejected about it. And I felt really bad for her. And I was like, did you try the hotline? There's a hotline. Um, but she said that that didn't work for her. And then it was like I talked to Nick like almost immediately after, and I was like, oh my gosh, this would have been a great solution for her to have an app and a small group of people who are actually engaged with her. Instantly
Yeah.
saw how that could have been helpful.
Yeah, no, that's such an interesting story, and I've heard many like this, and this was, yeah, one of the early insights, and we were like, we need to add this thing, and this idea of the red flag, a single tap that makes it easy to let your group know that you're not in a good place, you need help. Like I realized a lot of the hotlines out there are really a way to get connected with other resources, and they're not
Yeah.
as, focused on in the moment providing help. And this isn't at all to say that those hotlines for sure have value. So I'm definitely not saying that those aren't good resources. But yeah, having a group of people that you know already that can care and be there for you beyond just a quick phone call is sometimes helpful. And um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's sad that I think too many people have had that experience, not having anyone to turn to.
Yeah, no, that is really, I think the isolation is just it's brutal and it's hard to reach out to begin with. So when you reach out and nobody's there, that's even more discouraging.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but let's talk a little bit about how we got here because I know that you have some personal experience, like you understand, like there is nothing that engenders empathy like personal experience.
Right.
Right. If you've never struggled, it's easy to just be like, well, just stop. Like that's the like whether it's drinking.
Why can't you just stop?
Yeah. And you and I know that that is just such a ridiculous statement, right?
Yep.
So, but you have some personal experience, but I'm always curious. I always like to ask about like the early years, because I feel like childhood kind of sets the stage for developing identity, and it could either bolster and make you strong, or if there are some things that happen that hurt you, it could sort of create dysfunction. So, I'm always curious, what was your relationship like with your parents?
Man, you are just on point because I think I've been going through new layers of understanding how this theme of early childhood fit into my story, even just recently, reading more books. As a founder working in addiction recovery, I talk with a lot of clinicians and constantly kind of understanding different types of modalities for understanding where addiction stems from and how to think about um, evidence-based ways of getting healing. And I don't think I really understood in my own recovery process and the programs that I was a part of the role of my relationship with my family. And so I grew up moving around a lot. So I was the oldest of five kids. I was born in Utah, and we moved to Arizona, California, Green Bay, Wisconsin, Washington State. That's where I went to high school. I left the house. Um, and then I grew up in a pretty religious home. So I actually ended up going in and doing like a 2-year volunteer mission for our church organization living in New York City. So I lived in the Bronx and
Oof.
Brooklyn and Queens. And I'd moved around a lot, and I liked this change of, seeing different parts of the country. And I always kind of felt like I could fit in with any group of people. I didn't really belong with the jocks or the nerds. These are outdated labels. Yeah, labels are
I
bad,
don't know.
but
I think they still kind
whatever
of,
you call it. Like I had friends
yeah.
in kind of every kind of nook and cranny, personality type, interest type. I did sports, I did music, I loved, academics. Like I kind of always felt interested in a lot of things. And my siblings are also kind of all different from each other in like their kind of natures and their interests. And so I felt like I was kind of a connective glue, and like I felt like I could get along with any of them in different ways. And I kind of enjoyed that about myself. With my parents, I did feel this expectation as the oldest to perform or to achieve in a certain way. I think there was a lot of this driven by kind of the religious undertone, like the morals and values of expectations of being a good person is kind of the summary. More so just like being ultra obedient. Like I think, learning new words to talk about this now, I realize that there was a lot of rigidity in our
Yeah.
household.
Yeah.
There was a lot of definitely like knew that they loved me, but I think they're doing their best, and I look back at their childhoods now and their family systems. I think I have a lot more new insights on how incredible of a job they did, and realizing that I'm, understanding and unpacking any sort of, hurt that I feel from my childhood doesn't have to be a knock on them. Or,
Right.
I
Yeah.
think a part of me has always wanted to, like, I have a good relationship with my parents overall, and I don't want to see them in a bad light. So I think this has been a tough thing for me to realize, where, my childhood doesn't seem that super dysfunctional. My parents are happily married, no crazy traumatic experiences that I can really think of. Abuse wasn't something that I experienced. I had a lot of great parts of my childhood. And so I think for a long time, I never really questioned or was curious about kind of the internal me that developed, the young Chandler. And looking back, I think some of that rigidity, some of the expectations and the pressure, I think over time translated into a sense of like my personality being really wired as an achiever. Like whatever I set my mind to,
Yeah.
I could go after and do, whether it was sports or academics.
Or
Um,
founder of a company.
sure, yeah, yeah. I think, yeah. So yeah, and
CEO.
man, okay, Arlina, I've realized this is something lately that I've realized how if I hadn't struggled with addiction myself, I actually don't think I'd be as decent of a founder or CEO as I am right now. And
Yeah.
anyways, I think I
That's
had the
fair.
privilege
That's
growing up
actually
of
really fair. A lot of these dysfunctions have like quite
right.
strong attributes to them.
Sure. Yeah, and I hope we
Yeah.
can spend some time talking about how
Oh, we will.
like these experiences I don't think need to be just what holds us back. So I guess this was part of my mindset that I realized was later on in high school. So I, social media was coming out at the time, so I get my first smartphone, and growing up in a rigid household, and I'm the oldest, right? There's all sorts of rules around technology and how we use stuff, and my parents are deathly afraid as like strong Christian people that we're going to encounter pornography and stuff like that, um, and so that even just relationships and dating, they were like, very like kind of involved, wanting to make sure that we were being good. And I feel like that sense of
No
like,
holding hands, no
yeah, like being
being
questioned
alone.
like that. Well, I feel like I already had an intrinsic desire to like be a good person, and was like, from the outside, like peers or teachers perceived me as like, I don't know the right word, but like I would excel and be a good, kind person, not getting into trouble. I don't know what the right word is, like, but I love to, I think, be engaged in relationships and in activities. And anyways, and so feeling like there was just constantly pressure of like, don't screw up in all these potential ways, and I'm like, okay, like, yeah, like I have no
Oof.
desire. Um, and so, I was exposed over social media first to pornography, and I recognize, from a values and morals perspective, especially with that kind of religious background, I was like, yeah, this is something that I don't believe is good for me. I don't want to be looking at. But, being a curious teenager, continued to just kind of like stumble upon it, and natural curiosity kind of led me into a path where it became habitual, and over time realized like, okay, I think like I'm starting to lose the ability to, like, I'm trying to not engage in this behavior, but I can't seem to like stop, or to have control. Self-control is the way I was thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I think it was less about the moral aspect of pornography and more about the sense of I'm not able to control my actions in this area. I felt like intentionally I never, want to go and pursue pornography again. Like, it is something I don't want, but yet I would. And so that dissonance of like not being able to feel like I could achieve what I was wanting to achieve, or to align my decisions with my values, was really where I started to feel, I think, a lot of this compounding shame, and a lot of the like kind of, it doesn't matter how good the rest of my life is going, I'm a failure. Like, and people don't know. My parents,
Wow.
my friends, I am like, if only they knew, the Chandler that they think that is, excelling or whatever, I suck because I can't seem to get this really simple thing under control. And I think over time, this compounds into, that's what I would turn to escape feeling those pains and that shame, to feel less lonely, and to feel, that self-acceptance that only compounded into, well, you suck again, I guess you're just like
Mm.
continuing to be trapped. And so, I think I had this sense of like, I always wanted to work on it. There wasn't a part of me that was just like, intentionally, I'm just going to go wander. And, later on, I realized that I have a problem and I need help. It was always kind of early on that I was like really trying to get on top of this. And it was like, the harder I tried, the worse it got. And
I know,
like,
isn't that
I felt
crazy?
about myself. And so that's kind of the early, story. And then I think realizing that the expectations kind of feeling from my parents that were good intention, I think were definitely a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot. There's a lot to unpack there, but not the least of which is recognizing that your parents are human and they made mistakes, but it's not about blaming them, but it's
Yeah.
just sort of like an acknowledgement of reality that they're human and then they made mistakes. It doesn't mean they're bad people, but that's something that it's challenging to wrestle with, right? Especially people that have addictions. We want to look back and we want to say, why did this happen? And in my mind, it doesn't matter what the addiction is. It's like the purpose of obsession is distraction. It's like distracting from living, I grew up in a religious house, a Christian household too. I believe you're Mormon, right? So that
Yeah.
it goes along with there's a set of standards that are specific to that religion. And I didn't grow up Mormon, but I also grew up under a specific set of, guidelines, let's call them, that felt very suppressive of my actual humanity. And it was almost like the denial of that humanity caused me to act out in other
Yeah.
ways. It was like I didn't have, and I don't know if you felt this way. I don't know what your men's groups were like, but like I didn't have a safe place to be like, this is what's really happening,
Yeah.
and so I don't know if because like it's almost like there was this ideal, this expectation of perfectionism, and it sounded like you were really like, if we were gonna look at the standard, you're kind of hitting all the
Well, and
checking
that's
all the boxes.
and then I think that's not even like healthy, but yes, like probably true. Like, I was a 4.0 student even through college, and like, you know, varsity cross country and track and things like that. And like running was the sport that I got into that no one in my family liked. And they're like, why are you doing this? Running sucks. And like, yeah, I got into running because like, I mean, it's painful, but
I would agree with them.
I,
Yes.
I can push myself and do hard things. Like that was,
Yeah.
I was absolutely like always ready to take on a challenge in really anything. And so, yeah, it was like head on, like I'm trying to like grapple with this, new thing that's like a very much a challenge in my life, that
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. It could have been like, alcohol or whatever else. Like honestly, video games, like it really doesn't matter. But it felt like this was the thing that I could not control, and it fed that. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what it looked like on paper and how, well I was doing in my life. It was not good enough. Yeah.
And I think that's, pornography addiction is one of those things, like all those sexual dysfunction things are easy to hide.
Oh
Like
yeah. Right.
even in recovery,
Wow.
you get into these recovery communities and, love and sex addiction is something that's very easy to hide, especially with smartphones. You can just, you know, anyway, it's just very challenging. And they all roads lead to that, very dark and lonely place of like, I hate myself.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sad because I think, the beauty in understanding sexuality is it is designed to be a really beautiful, good part of our human existence. And
Right.
the distortion of that into something that becomes, about self-loathing and, craving connection, but only finding, right, false connection or, a lack thereof. I think it's sad 'cause I think it really does speak to most people, especially when in the realm of sexual addictions, are craving deeper belonging, deeper acceptance.
Yeah, yeah. And with social media and the internet and stuff like that, it's, as a mom, I have kids that are 20, boy, I have a mom of two boys and one's almost 24, 20 and 24. And it's like, it's how do you protect your kids? How do you, nobody really wants to talk about that. Like when do you start talking about that to your kids? And like we're very open, but these are difficult conversations and you can try to give your kids other healthy coping skills, but it's something I feel like it's so prevalent and there's so much access to it. It's like nearly impossible to avoid.
Right. Well, and this is where I think the thing that someone trapped feels is like, well, I need to curb the demand, I need to curb the access. And quickly almost everyone finds that that's nearly impossible. And
Yeah.
also, potentially, well, not potentially, it's really not actually the root of the issue is like the access of
Right.
the issue. It is
Yeah.
like and I'm glad you brought up like in most people's stories, like they don't, I guess, have the space or a group or people that can help them realize that it's not really about access to, whatever you're using that's unhealthy. It's, hey, what's deeper that's causing you to turn here in the first place? And for me, looking back to your question of childhood, I think it's that I wanted to feel more pursued and like accepted. And
Mm.
and although like I know my parents loved me, like I think I needed that a little deeper, which again isn't a knock on them. It's just like I think needs that weren't fully met. Um,
Yeah, it's kind of a system issue too when you're growing up in a very strict I think it's is it fair to say that the Mormon religion's a little bit strict?
oh, for sure, yeah, lots of
Yeah.
guidelines, lots of yeah.
There's, and listen, I love me some Mormons. I worked at this startup and as a non-drinker, I was surrounded, like my best
Yeah.
friends were the Mormons because they didn't drink
Oh,
either.
that must have been nice. Yeah,
Oh my God, it was so great. And they
yeah,
were very I was typically the only woman in a male dominant sales
sure.
culture. And I felt very protected. It
That's
was
awesome.
awesome.
That's
They're
cool.
really
Yeah,
great people. So I don't mean to disparage anybody. I didn't come from that religion. I still had religious trauma, you
right.
know. Um, but
No, there's
so
certainly yeah, lots of good things, about my religious
of
upbringing that
course,
I really do appreciate, and
yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Not the least of which is the idea of being loved by a higher being, like
Yeah,
the creator. I call it God. There's, sometimes I go with source or the universe, just kind of whatever floats my boat that day.
yeah,
But it's nice to know that even on that level, I'm not alone. Even in spirit or energy, I'm not alone. And my mind is always telling me that I'm alone. Like I have to do it on my own. And I think that comes from childhood of like, I was also I kind of fell into that achievement trap.
sure.
Like my worth is based on my ability to
Two peas.
achieve.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
two peas in a pod then.
Yeah, we are. And I'll tell you what, I found the silver lining in that, the asset in that is that, like, when I work with other women, like, I can't really do anything with somebody who's not willing to take like somebody who's in the victim mode. It's like if I can't quickly transition somebody out of the victim mode into a place of being willing to take responsibility. It's very difficult to get somebody to assume responsibility. But I feel like people that are like, like I have a rescuer complex, I have an overachiever issue,
That was
workaholism is,
probably never an issue for you, right? Like, yeah, it was, I
yeah.
take responsibility for better and worse, by the
Oh, trust me, usually it's for the worst. But I find that it's easier to back off of responsibility as opposed to trying to get somebody to assume responsibility, don't you think?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's an interesting thought.
Yeah, so we're in good shape. Uh, but let's transition a little bit to, where was the transition for you? It sounds like there was a period of time, like, listen, when you were talking about I wanted to be different and I didn't control it, like that is sort of the anthem of the addict. Even if it's a process addiction, a physical, it's like I don't want to do this thing and I have no control over it. Like that is the crux of it. And so, what started to right the ship for you?
Yeah. So looking back, like, I think my story is sometimes a little bit different than, I've talked to a lot of other people now where it was largely kind of this self-analysis of I'm trying, I have a hypothesis, so I'll try harder. And usually it was like I'll try harder and maybe I'll tweak some, I don't know, like systematic thing about access, right? Like making it harder to potentially slip up. Wouldn't work. So the results show that didn't work. Go through the
Yeah,
cycle for, I don't know, probably a few years of like actively
a
trying, right?
few years.
Probably, yeah, 2, 3 years. And so now I'm like, because yeah, started kind of early in high school, kind of pretty quickly was like actively trying to curb it, change it, actively got worse, so then the process continues. I'm about to graduate high school and leave the house. And and so I was kind of self-identifying like it's been too long, this doesn't work. I'm willing to get help. I'm not afraid of that. And I had come across, well, my mom had actually come across this kind of, yeah, local like young adults men's group basically. And she had approached me and asked about the topic of pornography, and I
Your
felt
mom?
like yeah, I felt like I could be honest with her because
Why didn't your dad say anything?
oh, so yeah, this is interesting. He still has like almost never been like said anything really about like and he knows what I do for work, right? It's still just like this
Your
very
dad's like,
like
I don't
I
want to
think he was
know.
he was a little bit more detached than my mom in general.
Oh, okay.
He, was basically an only child. His one brother was 12 years younger than him. And
Wow.
I think his parents' relationship was weird is maybe the right word to just describe it. And I think he was isolated. He didn't really have a lot of people, and he moved once a year every year until he was 18. So my dad's awesome. He went on also to be a CEO of many companies and has achieved in a lot of ways. Emotionally, I feel like it's been frustrating because I want to connect deeper. And I
Yeah.
think, again, having a lot of empathy for him and his story, whether he's understood it or not, I don't
Hmm.
know if he has or looked into um, kind of his journey. But I think, I don't know if or what struggles or types of struggles he's had in his life, but this wasn't one, when he was aware of, after I talked to my mom, never really was a conversation. And that's always been a little puzzling to me. But anyways, like my mom had been, open with us kind of just general kind of family guidelines like, hey, like pornography is like not good. It has a lot of these downsides and we want to protect you kids. So that's why, phone restrictions, blah, 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 blah. As, in addition to just like not wanting us to be glued on devices. So there was the
Mm.
strict, my mom was kind of the enforcer, the vocal, like, here's all the rules. My dad was traveling a lot and he's super busy with work. Um, and so yeah, she just kind of felt, I think, nudged on a spiritual level, like, hey, I need to just talk to Chandler. And so I opened up to her and I was like, yeah, it's something that I've been dealing with, but I'm like trying to work on it and it's been tough. And I think she took a lot of the blame and felt like she was a failure as a mother, feeling like she didn't know like how she could have
It's a
helped me.
mother's lot. It's guilt.
Right. And then so now I'm also kind of, trying to be the rescuer and like, no, mom, like you're awesome. Like, trying to help manage her emotions, while also being like,
Yeah.
was so early in my process. I probably hadn't really realized a lot of, what was really going on within me. But anyways, she was like, I think a healthy amount of like willing to help it, to whatever degree she could. She basically was like, hey, here's this group resource. They meet over Zoom. I don't know if you're open to it. It's your choice. And I was like, sure, I'll try something. Like, I realized doing this alone doesn't work. That was kind of my
Yeah.
self-diagnosis.
Yeah.
And so I ended up giving it a try. And so it was, yeah, once a week over Zoom. It was a clinician-led thing, mostly focused on like process addiction, sexual addiction. I think there was some like kind of co-occurring things for some people, but it wasn't really about pornography explicitly. It was just kind of a general recovery group led by a therapist. And that was my first real experience talking to other people. And that was the turning point and realizing like, I think I rose to the occasion in the sense of just realizing very quickly that isolation is a big part of this issue. I
Yeah.
have this support system of other people. Going into it, I was like, this is going to be weird. Like, what type of weird, like, screw ups are going to be on the other end of this call? Sounds really harsh, but, again, I saw myself
Everybody
like,
thinks that.
I'm not the type of person that should be struggling with this. I don't know who is, but it's not, me coming from this achiever complex. And then realizing all these other dudes on the call who were, probably between 18 and 25 years old. Some of them starting college and their careers. And I'm like, no, they're all like normal people who have ambitions for life and are like,
Just like
different
you.
stories, different personalities. Yeah, just like me. And I was like, I took a real interest in like becoming friends with them, and like working the process. And I think it was also helpful to, for the first time, just get some basic education on the psychology behind what was happening and realizing that
Okay.
it's not about willpower, right? It's like there's these kind of issues, and here's how it kind of works in the brain. Just some basic like neuroscience 101, and like those things were really, really helpful for me. And so I just went like hard, and I went through another series later on of relapses and struggling. And so I think I made a lot of progress early on. I was still really focused on I can control this and I'm just going to use all the tools. And so it did help me for a while. I think later on I realized that I was still thinking about it a bit the wrong way. And so as I leave the house, and I lived in New York for a couple of years, I was helping a lot of other people. Like we were teaching them about Jesus, right? That's what
Right.
we
Yeah.
as missionaries. But a big part of what we were doing was honestly just helping people that were dealing with all sorts of life challenges, and
Right.
God as a mechanism to help them, um, yeah, like cope, or to develop, hope through challenges.
Yeah.
I worked a lot with the Hispanic population in New York, so a lot of them were immigrants from lots of different countries,
Yeah.
and I loved my experience living there, in large part because I could meet these people who had gone through really hard things, working three jobs and sending money back to family, in Ecuador, wherever it was, and they were dealing with lots of challenges, and addiction was a really common theme, all
Yeah.
types of substances, and different like behavioral issues too. And so I felt a sense of empathy from my own journey of like these people who wanted to change, who felt trapped, who felt so alone, and they literally were alone, living in like these terrible apartments alone in New York, and their families were across the world. And I think through that experience, like developed new like um I don't know, just like passion for recovery. This leads to, more of my why behind starting Relay. But at the same time, I was out there and I started to struggle again. And I had been clean for 6 months or a year or something. And again, I go through the same cycles of like this achievement complex of I'm out here, representing, my church and God, and I'm trying to like live a certain way. This contradicts completely with like what I should be doing, right? And like I didn't want to be doing it, but working 80-hour weeks out there in New York, talking to people about Jesus, and most people don't care. Like that's a stressful environment that I again wasn't
My
really like
gosh.
have the tools to realize I was under a lot of stressors. And uh,
Yeah.
so I started to get a lot of like trust from, it's a group of like 300 of these like young adult like missionaries overseen by kind of one like more like senior, probably someone between 40 to 60 years old, like a real adult like couple is kind
A
of
real adult.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're like the CEO, right,
Seasoned.
of the mission, and
Yeah.
they're kind of organizing, where are you located, and who are you paired with, so you're always with a companion. And I eventually got, there's some organization, right, and leadership like structure to like how it works. And I was essentially like promoted or like, given really leadership opportunities is what it was to,
Yeah.
it was all in a service capacity, to be essentially in charge of training the entire body of 300
Of course
church.
it was you.
Right. And I was like, of course. And at this moment, right, a year into my 2 years, this was the crux of like, pornography, probably worse than it ever had been. And so like
Yeah.
the
Oh,
ultimate
the
like
shame.
oh, the shame. Like I am the absolute worst. Everyone thinks I'm the best. there's like no ounce of pride really in my heart about that. It's just like this
Yeah.
complete like shame cycle. Like, and it
Oh,
sucked. This was a really terrible time, but at the same time, it was weird because I still felt like, and this is a lesson that I think I've learned later, it's really not about how many days sober you are to be able to like help and be there for others. Like
right.
I look back and I'm like, was I still, sincerely contributing good to the people of New York and to those other like fellow volunteers that were out there doing the missionary work too? And I'm like, yeah, like I know that I was able to like help all these people. It did like it's not that I'm, a hypocrite. Like it wasn't willful, rebellion, hiding in secret. I was
Right.
clearly still like working through some things and
It
separate.
sounds like you were suffering.
Yeah, yeah, there was for sure some suffering and
Yeah.
compounded by how I was seeing it. Really, it was probably a lot of
Yeah.
self-driven suffering. But
Yeah.
anyways, that's more in depth probably than I've actually ever gone into that chapter. But it was a huge
Yeah.
another phase of realizing like the real issue, really isn't how many days clean I am. It's continuing to unpack the fact that life is hard and I have these stressors and
Mhm.
I keep turning here when I have these stressors and starting to realize, how to get healthier overall in my life so that I'm not just constantly
Yeah.
working myself into the ground and putting pressure on myself and seeing
Yeah.
setbacks, not as failures, but as a chance to sit back and to reflect and to learn and to be curious and compassionate. So in Relay, when people can
Yeah.
track their sobriety, we also allow them to track a more holistic, set of things that are helping them not just avoid relapses, but move to a healthier place. Terminology is something that every therapist I've talked to has a different opinion on the right words to use for like,
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's hard to get a
sobriety.
consensus.
There really isn't, but the word that we kind of currently use is a setback, and we try to teach it as just like sports or anything, like it's okay to acknowledge when something didn't go your way. A setback isn't an ultimate point of defeat, but it
Yeah.
should be an opportunity to sit back and to learn and to be curious and to be keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And so I started to learn to, I think, see it that way as I then, go to college and we ended up starting Relay at the very end of our college experience, me and a few friends. And through my college experience, I got back involved with groups, and I think just continuing to work on the same set of learnings that I had and figuring new things out each iteration, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. The cool thing is this, you'll never get bored of this because it's always evolving and changing, and
Yeah,
it's really important work that you're doing. And I think what was coming up for me as you were sharing is that we don't have to be perfect to help people.
yeah.
Like, as there's like really no such thing, right?
Oh, for sure.
And
Yeah,
I actually feel like our shortcomings, or whatever you want to call them, actually gives us a little bit of empathy and compassion.
yeah.
That's what I kept hearing as you were talking, is like you have a level of self-compassion that's actually required for healing, because you can't hate yourself well, right? We
It
don't
was so
do the
so much easier to see others, whether it was the other guys in my group who were struggling, or those people in New York, or friends at college who I was being more vulnerable and open with, and realizing they were doing the hard things. It was always so much easier to see that someone else was in that shame cycle than
yeah.
see it in myself. But as I embrace this idea of I don't need to impose this like ideal you know length of healing that I need to have achieved before I can be there, be of service to others and make an impact. Like as I like realized that I already had so many insights and like that empathy that it did, I think, place me in a really powerful position that I appreciated. And I think this was like a healthy part of my journey where I started to realize like I wanted to be the one in these groups to like try to rally people together and see how we could help each other. And so this also kind of led to Relay, realizing that that took a lot of proactive work, but I feel like I had the empathy and I had some of the understanding, even if I was still there working on myself. And then eventually realizing, hey, it'd be cool if there was a tool that made this all a little easier.
Yeah, let's talk about Relay a bit, because when I sat on a call with Nick and he was explaining, it's like my set my hair on fire. I was like, oh my God, because I feel like the landscape of recovery is changing. And I don't care if it's drugs, alcohol,
Yeah.
process addictions, gambling, all the things, shopping. Um, what we really need is a place where we feel comfortable, and where we get it. But we need to meet people where they're at. And a lot of people, what I'm hearing is that like I was in a yoga class yesterday and the gal she was talking about how she didn't really liked going to the places like they were like church basements or kind of
Yeah,
run down like pe where people kind of in the 12-step communities there's not a lot of money, so they're often holding spaces and places that are not
super
ideal.
personal. Yeah,
Yeah, let's just call it just not ideal. And people need to feel comfortable, right? And we're in this very creative, open era where it's like, well, what else can we do? Like, let's create our own communities. But I found that the Relay Help app was hitting all the markers, right? It's something that we hold at the end of our hand, right? It's readily available all the time. And so you always have access to support. And I like the fact that it was small groups of people that are struggling. And it sounded like it can be anonymous or you really get to know these people. So it could be,
yeah,
I work with a lot of healthcare professionals, doctors or lawyers, like people in professions where anonymity is really important, right? But they still need that small group connection. And
yeah,
so let's talk about some of and I liked also, obviously you have a very strong faith and you have this that's available to you. But I also noticed when as I was signing up, you had options for all kinds of faith and including other. Like, so even if you really kind of fall outside of traditional Buddhist or Christian or whatever, you could still find your people,
yeah, yeah.
religious or yeah.
Yes, yeah, we actually, yeah, and what's actually happening on the back end right now is like if someone says, hey, spirituality, religion just really isn't like kind of a part of my worldview right now, or something that like you identify with, we have groups that are with people who also are aligned with that, and so like more secular, like so nothing in the Relay app is actually baking in one way or another, and that's I think what we realized that I talked to a lot of people who felt like um, they and a lot of people who I met who were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so like Mormon, but then they left and they didn't really feel like they believed in God at all anymore. And they felt like, well, I still care actually about working on some of these issues that, I'm working through, whether it's alcohol or pornography or whatever it is. And but like the 12 step philosophy is very kind of rooted in spirituality and in defining what higher power means for you, so you can still kind of adapt it. But I had a number of people reach out and say, like, I really appreciate how Relay doesn't force you to like take on that perspective. But if God, and your definition of what God means to you is a part of that, you can make it a part of your Relay experience and be with people who are like that, and vice versa. And so, yeah, we're trying to just help people find the right type of group for them
Yeah.
to be able to help.
Yeah. Yeah. So I loved, Nick kept using this word or this phrase of reducing friction. And really, what that said to me is the ability to meet people where they're at without creating resistance.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like resistance is the thing.
Oh
It's
yeah.
like this internal struggle that we have. We want to do something, but we also have this resistance. So I really appreciated, and I don't know if you probably realize how powerful it, but I was like, that's really powerful. This meet people where they're at, reduce the friction so that we can connect.
Yeah.
And and in that connection, I've heard Brene Brown say that empathy is the antidote to shame, right?
Yeah.
And so you're working, it's like get what you're going through and are not going to judge you, but it's like here's what I did that helped, kind of a thing.
Totally. Well, in the church basement thing, like that's the example of friction where if people realize, hey, I do want community, a lot of the options are, requiring you to go somewhere that,
True church, yeah.
isn't ideal. I like that word. Yeah. It's, a dingy basement again. Yeah. And I think cool that it's free, but the downside is, yeah, like I went to an AA meeting with a friend the other week actually, and yeah, the location was less than welcoming, right? It's like when you walk
Yes.
into a doctor's office that's like really like just bad versus a hospital that's like brand new, or whatever. It
Yeah.
just feels
Environment
like modern.
matters.
Environment does matter whether you care about aesthetics or not. Like it does go to that sense of, am I comfortable? Do I belong here? Am I safe?
Yeah.
And also,
Oh, that's a big
like
one.
talking about different types of people, like as a woman, if I had gone to that AA meeting with my friend the other week, I would have felt probably a little weird because there were no other women in that particular meeting. And that
And it
was
wasn't
like,
a men's meeting.
no, it was like,
It was
whoever,
just an
just
open meeting,
open
but there was
meeting. Yeah.
on,
And so it
yeah,
just so
only
happened,
dudes.
and, it's just happened to be the demographic there that morning that, is a bunch of kind of older, dudes. And so
Yeah.
even as a 26-year-old dude, right, I was like, if I, were coming here really for myself, I don't know that I would like for sure want to come back here. However, I do
Yeah.
love that you don't need to be exactly with other people who are like exactly like you to feel that sense of belonging and recovery, because I think there is something bonding about being with other people who are diverse and different from you that have the same goal of healing. And so yeah, reducing friction has always been this theme of relay, and realizing that a lot of people, they feel like it's too high of a barrier to get to that in-person meeting, and even doing stuff over Zoom where I have to show my face. Anonymity is like harder in that setting.
Hmm.
Relay making it kind of our first focus was like we want people to feel like they can get matched with a group of people. So unlike Reddit, where sure I can go be anonymous and see a million other people talking about recovery, I'll never see those people again. And there's something different about seeing like the little avatar and gamer dude 123. It just doesn't really feel like that meaningful to me compared to like being in a group where like I can use just my first name or a nickname or something that still protects my anonymity. But I'm with Nick and Joe and Beth, like, and we're together, and I'm getting to know them because they're real people, but there's still like I can opt in to be more um, you know, of myself, or like connect on a deeper level as I feel comfortable,
Hmm.
but not sacrifice the approachability of like I'm not ready to commit 2 hours a week to go to a church basement, or that's just like not what's going to work for me. So I think a lot of people who like relay find that it actually fits with a busy schedule a lot better, where these meetings that most groups and programs and 12-step things have, that one of the downsides beyond the location is, it's usually a once a week thing unless you can somehow commit more time to do it more frequently than that. If your area even has those meetings available. Um, with Relay, we found that a lot of people need kind of infrequent touch, or sorry, more frequent but lighter weight touch points. So 5 minutes on my lunch break, I can check in, quickly catch up on a conversation. And it's that little dose that keeps me going or keeps me grounded and rooted, where we're able to extend those recovery touch points to really work within your life, as opposed to stepping out of your life to go to a recovery meeting and then going back into the stressful life that you're living. So something about having it be on your smartphone and be accessible, where groups are talking, and able to talk at any time throughout the day. Even though it's asynchronous, someone might not respond, right away because I'm working, but I'll see it in a few hours or something. And I can be in multiple teams if I find that I actually just want to have a little bit more set of people that I can for sure, have conversation with the second that I want it. Like, so from an app perspective, it's hard to like force people to respond timely, right? So there's that story that you brought up at the beginning of, we want people to always feel like when they need it, they can have someone to talk to. That's a hard thing to always guarantee. However, I think there's a lot higher chance that you can find that when you're getting a support system that is persistent, that you are getting to know, that
Yeah.
you're sticking with, um, and that you can kind of have flexibility to customize what that looks like for you. So
Yeah, and the ability, I saw that there's like an ability to switch groups
yeah,
and
yeah,
things like that. So if you need, people that are more responsive for a particular period of time, of course there should be some ground, and I noticed that there was ground rules set, in the it just like being patient with other people, like everyone's busy these days. And so there was like, and then there was like all these prompts of like, how do you engage? Like you had actual questions. I had to like screenshot that. I was like, I'm totally going to use that in my women's group. These questions
do
were
it.
so good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to just share some of the questions, but it was like something that's been hard for me lately. Something I've been learning. I've been struggling lately feeling, which is so important to go to those feeling
Yeah.
statements as opposed to thinking. Something that's, well, and then something that's been on my mind. Um, One area I could really use support in. I love to hear what's working for you. I mean, these are amazing questions to just get
Yeah.
conversations going.
And again, it's like decreasing the friction instead of hoping people that like come up with such thoughtful questions. Like how can we create templates that make it easier for us to help each other to where
Yeah.
like recovery is so hard already and people are going through such hard things.
Yeah.
We want it to feel like we can take a load off you. Like you come into relay and like sure, there's kind of some structure, but the structure meant to really impose a sense of like, oh man, there's more things I need to live up to and do. But rather it's
Yeah.
actually like, okay, here's like making it clear the ways in which I can engage to deepen my connection. Here's the ways in which I can like a tool that I can use to process feelings. Yeah, to go
Right.
in
Yeah.
and understand how to regulate the emotions that I'm experiencing and just be aware of them. Like, I don't know if you saw the stories feature, but kind of similar to
Oh,
Instagram with
that's right. Yeah.
like,
Yeah. He told me
yeah.
about Nick said about
So
the
like as I
stories.
do so I can kind of curate or the app helps you curate a customized recovery zone, which includes, hey, what is kind of the thing that you are looking to recover from? But it's also about, hey, what are some other, kind of boundaries and also self-care things that you're working on to help you move
Right.
towards a healthier place? Combined with we give you tools to focus more on feelings, so it's not just behaviors, but all of those things. As I'm checking in each day, my team can automatically see a little story just like you would on social media when someone posts of, hey, Chandler just checked in and he logged that he's feeling stressed and lonely. I don't even necessarily need to throw that red flag for you to come in and see, oh, I see Chandler just did a check in, I'm going to send some encouragement or spur a conversation out of that. It takes the friction out of just more visibility and more transparency, breaking down those silos of isolation.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I love the stories feature because I see people doing that. Like that lady I was telling you about, like she was checking, she uses her TikTok as a way to check in,
Oh,
right? But it's
interesting.
sort of like this anonymous, like she's just throwing it out to
Whoever.
every whoever, right? But it would be so nice to be able to like, if you have a core group of just like being checking in with the same
Yeah.
people that
Yeah.
who actually know you and start to care about you over time. And as far as ground rules, I was scrolling through my pictures as I was reading those questions, but the big seven that sort of is like the guidelines on how to use the app so that everybody is safe and everybody kind of gets like sort of the ground rules. So there's not like this. It actually in my mind was like, oh, this isn't creating like unhealthy dependency. They're saying let's have you be responsible for your feelings, right?
Yeah.
Like not be overly dependent on the group.
I think this is a really important principle because I think sometimes the natural desire is to come in and yeah, I've been in that situation where I had no one to call or I tried people who said I could and they didn't
Yeah,
answer. I think
yeah,
it makes total sense, the need to feel like you can have people to rely on. However, that like the reality of life is there is always going to be a possibility that no matter how awesome you do at investing in your support system and putting people around you in your life that do care about you and no matter how much they really do care about you, it's just very possible that you'll be in a moment where there's not somebody that can answer the phone call or like be there. And so in those moments, although that isn't fun, like how can you develop a healthy internal sense of ability to navigate that? And isolation shouldn't persist forever. Like you should be able to then hopefully a few hours later, the next day, or like you need to be able to still, it's a balance. I don't know if I'm articulating it well, but
no,
like
yeah,
over
no, you're
dependence on support systems can be a a blocker to developing the important self-reliance in recovery.
right. Yeah,
I think the default for most people is they're already isolated and there's just so much friction in the world and not enough recovery places that make community easier where we're trying to like, yeah, we want people to experience the dose of support for sure, but it is a
yeah,
balance and yeah,
it is a
it's
balance, and even
expectations and realizing that it's important to always have expectations that are like
that are
proper,
reasonable.
reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah. Even in one of the some of the 12-step tenets, I'm a huge 12-step advocate. I realize it's not perfect and whatever,
Oh,
but
it's an amazing
even
framework. Yeah.
no, I love it. Even religious organization, like there's good in all of it, and sometimes we just need to understand how to navigate those communities or whatever. But they're even in the 12-step tenet, they say there will come a time when it's just between you and God,
Mm,
you and your higher power,
yeah.
right? Where you have to, there is this encouragement to rely on a power greater than yourself. In all these areas. So I like that there's some encouragement. We're not there, it's not black or white. It's not complete dependence or absolute isolation. There's a lot of gray area there. So I
Yeah,
like
that's
that there's like an encouragement to, yes, reach out and ask for help when you need it, but also, yes, develop sort of an internal um, locus of control, basically.
yeah, yeah, well said.
Yeah. That's very good. Well, listen, I feel like we're coming up on our time. I told you
This has
I'm
gone
like
fast. This has been awesome, awesome chat.
yes. Thank you so much. No, I'm really excited about the relay. I'm totally gonna start implementing this in my community as well because I do have a women's community on Facebook that I always invite, my listeners to join. But it's 1100 women. And a lot of times it's hard to be like, hey, this is what's really going on with me to a group that's that large. Like nobody wants to be the
True.
first one to say I'm struggling.
Yeah,
Right. And
yeah,
so I really feel like a small group support system would be really helpful. So I'm going to be encouraging my community to join Relay. Um, and so I think in the after we're done recording, I will find out what the code is for my
yeah,
community. But dude, it is so dirt cheap. It was like $49 for 3 months. I did the math. It's like, what is it, 54 cents a day or something like
yeah,
that?
right. It's like, yeah,
Is
yeah,
that
and
right?
yeah,
So
yeah, something
cheap.
like that. Like,
Oh my gosh, way cheaper than ther
way cheaper than therapy. Yeah,
way
yeah, and
cheaper than my coaching.
well, you're right. And I think the thing about Relay that we've realized is it's important to have a toolkit. So like a lot
Yeah.
of people using Relay, it's not the only thing they're using. And so to your point,
Oh
like
no.
your programs, your courses, your communities, like
Yeah.
Relay is designed to actually mesh into the ecosystem. And so
Yeah.
I think, the people that see that and are like, yeah, it makes sense to invest less than $50 for 3 months of
Yeah.
act this, and you can choose to renew that if you continue to need it. The hope is that, yeah, like if this is adding value to your life, it should be a no-brainer. And if it's not,
Yeah.
then yeah,
Yeah, I never used just one. I always did 12-step therapy. I was in book clubs. I just like jumped like I've always
yeah,
done a million things,
dove in.
which
Yeah.
might need a 12-step program of its own. Self-help junkie,
Yes,
which is
the balance and everything.
yeah, which is actually the name of this other podcast I was telling you about that my co-host Janine and I are launching the
Oh
self-help
yeah,
junkie because it's like you start to learn these tools and it's almost I mean you get like that little dopamine hit of like, oh my God, there is hope. I can
right.
change.
There are
I
actually so many
do
cool
feel
things out
better.
there. Yeah, there's actual like progress and hope, and there's frameworks and ways that it's actually
People
helping.
actually heal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be addicting all on its own. Service, being of service, oh, it's huge. Well, listen, thank you. So we're going to talk some more in the
Oh yeah.
future.
Thank
I'm
you.
really excited about bringing Relay into my community and all my communities so that we can have closer connections as in these smaller groups. I think that's going to be really powerful because personally, I want to get off social media. I find it to be really, detrimental to my mental
Yeah.
health.
Yeah.
But this has like all the components that I liked about it without all the stuff that I don't like about it. So I'm
That's
gonna
the
be
hope.
I'm gonna be making the hard push to get my community on Relay.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me. This has been an awesome conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for all the work you're doing.
Yeah, you too. Okay.
All
See ya.
right.